Money is an essential topic in politics. It's the number one issue in every political campaign. The left claims that the rich don't pay their fair share in taxes, and the right claims that the government's too big. In this video, I will build a simple economy from the ground up so that you can see how a free society prospers with a balance of capitalism and socialism. I am Jeff Schuster, and you're watching Reengineering Politics, which provides objective information on political matters so that you can make informed decisions for a better America. In this video, I will gradually build a relatively simple economy to illustrate how our government can serve or harm a thriving economy. Let's do a thought experiment. Let's say that you earn $50,000 per year. Now, 5 other people earn $2,000 per year each. You are the only 6 people who live in this world. Now, clearly, this world seems inequitable. I mean, why should you have all the wealth while others suffer? So I posted this question in my Reengineering Politics Facebook group, and I got several great responses. Most said that the wealthy person must have done something to earn their greater wealth. So let's take this thought experiment one step further. Let's say that the 5 poor people become upset with the grave amount of income inequality and they rob you. Would it be morally right if the 5 poor people robbed you to get their fair share? Without exception, many in my Facebook group were indignant. No one believed that the poor people deserved the wealth of the wealthy individual in this scenario. Even when we see income imbalance like this, robbery is immoral. Robbery seems to be unpalatable for most, and it's apparent that the wealthy individual won't voluntarily relinquish their wealth. So what if our poor people start a democracy? I mean, let's see what this would look like. The 5 poor people vote one of their own into office, and their government takes $15,000 of your income. This government then redistributes this money to the poor through government jobs and welfare. You're unhappy about this situation, but you still have a decent amount of money. But since you have much more money than the rest, the poor people still believe this economy is unfair. Your new government brags about creating 2 new jobs, one a politician and the other a government worker. Isn't democracy grand? Now, you may have noticed the flaws in my thought experiment. I mean, how can the wealthy individual earn $50,000 per year in an economy that's so small? And why are the poor people poor? Why are the poor people not striving to become better in this weird economy? The reality is that a free market is the thing that creates wealth without government intervention. In a free market, people earn more money as they gain skills that create benefits to the others in their marketplace. There are still poor people in the free market. However, in a free market, poverty is a result of low skills, laziness, or disability. Now, in fairness, some fall on hard times or they experience bad luck to find themselves in poverty. The benefit of a free market is that low-income earners are motivated to improve their skills to earn more and improve their lifestyle. This motivation is shown by the ambition arrows in this graphic. The indigent is the only player in a free market who cannot improve their skill level. They may be too old, too young, disabled, or handicapped in some way. So while the free market is pretty good, there are gaps. So let's try to fill those gaps with government services. When the government taxes the private sector to provide public services, a few things happen. The public services that don't lend themselves to a free market, such as roads, judicial systems, police, and fire departments, are now provided by the government. If the free market is allowed to run unregulated, unfair business practices will go unchecked, and the environment can be damaged without recourse. The government has the role of being the objective referee to ensure fair business practices benefit consumers and the environment. Since people, facilities, and other resources are needed in the government economy, The government is now competing with the private sector for these resources. Private sector companies must increase salaries and pay more for other resources. The indigent will not survive in a pure free market unless they're given charity by others. The government provides basic sustenance for the people who cannot provide for themselves. Welfare programs eliminate the ambition of the poor to seek great skills because it's easier for them to receive welfare than to work. This creates what's called the welfare trap. Those in the private sector have lower take-home pay than they would have otherwise. This is because government taxes income to fund its economy. In a progressive taxing environment, the wealthy pay most of the taxes. The middle class and wealthy do not get welfare payments from the government. These two factors create a disincentive to climb the economic class ladder. Many people want to purchase items that they can't afford. If the bank lends them money, they can buy whatever their heart desires. The only downside is that they must make periodic payments that reduce their future income. The government can also borrow money. When people want the government to provide more services, but they don't want to pay more in taxes, the government borrows money. Borrowing in both the private and public sectors creates a debt-based economy that looks something like this. As debt stimulates both the public and private sectors, competition for resources increases. Middle class and lower class workers, tired of climbing the private sector economic ladder, are drawn into the government economy. In the private sector, borrowing and repayment create debt cycles. When people borrow money, they inject more money into the economy. When those same people repay their loans, money is pulled out of the economy. If a business builds a factory with a loan from a bank and that factory creates new goods and more jobs, the overall economy grows. This is how money and wealth are created from nothing in the free market. If a business borrows money and defaults on its loan, it harms the economy. In the government sector, debt acts differently. There are two primary forms of debt creation for the federal government. The first is selling bonds to investors, and the second is money printing. The government borrows money from private investors who expect to be repaid their principal plus interest. This is no different than private sector debt. Money printing is a process that occurs only in the federal government. The Federal Reserve buys government bonds. So where does the Fed get the money to purchase these bonds? Well, they create this money out of thin air. This is why we call it money printing. When the government prints money and then spends that money, it fuels the economy by increasing the money supply. If the government repaid its debts, it would slow down the economy by decreasing the money supply. Since the government doesn't repay all its debt, it avoids the traditional debt cycle experienced in the private sector. It seems like the government can print an infinite amount of money and never repay its debts. There are three problems that result from this seemingly innocuous money printing and unpaid debt. The first is inflation, the second is interest payments, and the third is undisciplined spending. Inflation is the increase in the price of goods and services. When the government spends too much money into existence through excessive borrowing, there is more money than goods and services. This is exacerbated by the competition for resources between the private and public sectors. This forces the prices of those goods and services to rise. This has been a major problem with hyperinflation in the countries worldwide who have printed too much money. I encourage you to watch my video on inflation, why the economy feels so bad, if you want to learn more about how inflation has decimated the middle class. Our government is required to pay interest on all its debt. The cost of interest must be included in the yearly budget. In 2024, interest costs are expected to be as large as the U.S. military budget. Money allocated to interest costs cannot be used for government services. When companies or people in the private sector borrow money, the bank qualifies each loan. This means that the bank scrutinizes the object that they will purchase with the borrowed money. They may scrutinize the business ventures for business loans. This is not the case in the public sector. This means that the public can borrow money and not make wise investments. Here are a few examples of undisciplined spending. The first is paying for expenses that it cannot afford with its current budget or deficit spending. This is analogous to the payday loan in the private sector. The second is investing in infrastructure projects that will not provide economic benefit to its citizens, like the bridge to nowhere. The third is foreign aid that will not benefit the United States. And fourth is entitlement programs that encourage capable people not to work. This undisciplined spending is no different than business investments that fail in the private sector. Debt is neither good nor bad. Debt in the private sector is more disciplined because debt must be repaid by private sector debtors. If they don't repay their debt, their credit rating suffers and they experience genuine financial pain. Debt loopholes in the public sector have allowed politicians to escape negative debt repayment cycles, but have now placed our country in peril from the adverse effects of inflation and debt service costs. This is the same recklessness that has placed our Social Security and Medicare systems in peril. In a free market, a few people inevitably become very rich and powerful. Their wealth is often the result of creating a beneficial product or service that many people want and need. A few that exist in the United States include Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Warren Buffett, and Mark Zuckerberg, and I'm sure I've forgotten several. These folks tend to earn more money than they can spend in a lifetime. They often reinvest their wealth into their private sector businesses. Now, wealthy people become oligarchs when they start influencing the government and the free market. So wealthy people cannot help but influence both the government and the free market. This influence can be good, but it can also create dysfunction. Now, the good is produced by high levels of private investment that create benefit to us all. The bad is a result of oligarchs persuading politicians to act in a way that benefits them, but disadvantages other free market participants. This bad action happens in four ways: increased regulation, ignoring monopolies, public sector, private sector partnerships, and campaign donations. Oligarchs can prompt the government to create onerous regulations in their industry to prevent smaller competitors from being able to compete. These regulations seem good to most people. Many people think, hey, a high degree of regulation is bad for big business. The opposite is true. There are several antitrust laws that permit the government to intervene when companies get too big. The reason that too big companies harm the free market is that they limit the choice of consumers. This choice is necessary to keep prices reasonable and the quality high in a free market. Unfortunately, we have monopolies present in most industries in the United States that have been ignored by our government. A great resource to learn more about U.S. monopolies is openmarkets.org. I've left a link to the Open Markets website in the description below. In previous videos, I've called this corrupt regulation. There are companies that are so large that the government has created a symbiotic relationship with these companies. These relationships exist in defense contracting because the government relies on defense contractors for military resources. And frankly, any government contractor can develop this kind of relationship when the government cannot compete whatever product or service they're purchasing from such a contractor. These relationships are also developed with utility companies or other regulated monopolies. Politicians who need campaign donations will urge these wealthy individuals to donate to their campaigns. This request often results in a trade for favors that the government may grant such individuals. Such favors often thwart the free market economy. So if you want to know who's influencing your candidate, You can check their donations out at opensecrets.org. One point of caution. Since dark money isn't accounted for in political donations, Open Secrets will not show all of the money used to support the oligarchs. In the original thought experiment, I showed how the democratic process allowed the 5 poor people to override the will of the one wealthy individual. We are in a similar situation in 2024. However, the large group in 2024 is not the poor. The United States has become highly polarized between the left and the right. And here's how the current debt-hungry society is divided. The red signifies conservatives, or those on the right, and the blue signifies liberals, or those on the left. While this division is the divide between conservatives and liberals, it's not the division between Republicans and Democrats. Both Republicans and Democrats are attempting to win within the context of our current economic model. Oligarchs had typically aligned themselves with the right. They wanted low taxes and low amounts of regulation in their businesses. But in today's world, oligarchs are leaning more heavily toward the left. Why? Because they can just pass on higher tax payments to their consumers, so high taxes don't bother them. Oligarchs can use regulation to prevent competition from smaller companies that struggle under high government regulation. So with the advent of ESG, or environment social governance movements, many oligarchs are transforming their large companies to cater to more liberal causes. Banks love the higher debt climate because they earn profits by lending money. They also know that they will be bailed out by a government that is bank-friendly if they make too many bad loans. Lower income earners like a government to provide a safety net to prevent them from being poor. Many in the lower middle class are employed by the government. They enjoy high job security and a decent paycheck. The middle class and small business owners are the few people who are striving to make their lives better in the free market. The middle class is struggling to pay higher taxes and full price for all services, while their lower income counterparts are receiving free stuff. Small business owners don't enjoy the loopholes and the lobbying efforts by the large companies to dodge higher taxes. Our economy is what it is. However, where it is going is a problem. In all of my economic schematics, you may have lost track of the arrows that were labeled ambition. These arrows are less and less present in each graphic. Why? Well, most people in a free market hope to improve their income by increasing their skills or through innovation. 2 emotions drive this ambition: fear and hope. Free market participants fear that they will lose what they have or not be able to pay for their current lifestyle. They hope that investments in their skills or their businesses will give them a better lifestyle. An increasing size of government allows low-income earners to rid themselves of this free market anxiety. Sadly, this security comes at the cost of dashing hopes of these same people by blocking opportunities to improve their lot in life. The larger our government grows, the larger this gap between the government economy and the private sector economy becomes. The larger this gap becomes, the less likely poor and low-income earners will try to bridge it to participate in the private sector free market. And the fewer participants we have in the free market, the less tax revenues we have for the government economy. The less revenue in the government economy will ultimately drive the desire for increased debt. There's a reason why the United States has attained its place as an economic superpower in the world. Valuing free market principles with a reasonable investment in government services has served the U.S. economy well for most of its existence. Watching this video and seeing these charts, you may believe that I favor the red portion or the political right in all of these economic charts, and you'd be wrong. I value both sides. As I've described in the problem section, we are abusing debt and destroying the ambition that can exist in a free market economy. We still need many of the government services, and we must care for the indigent. The government's role in a healthy economy is to be an objective arbiter and reasonably regulate all businesses regardless of their owner's wealth. And all debt is not bad, but using debt to fund expenses that exceed revenues perpetually is foolish. Using debt to bridge the gap between the low income and the middle income often does the opposite. Instead of bridging it, it often widens the gap between the low income and the middle class. Debt invested in infrastructure that will benefit younger generations is wise. When it comes to oligarchs and money in politics, the best antidote for this is you educating yourself on political issues. If you educate yourself, you'll be less susceptible to political advertisements. And if you're less swayed by advertisements, money in politics has little impact. In fact, you may make a habit to vote for the candidate who has the least amount of campaign funds. And taxation must match expenditures. The only time our government should spend more than it earns is for emergencies. Natural devastation or war can justify spending more than we tax. The United States now has a higher debt to GDP ratio than ever in history. And the last time our debt was even close to this high was in World War II. We have no war, no other emergency. We must balance taxation with spending. You may see the struggling low-income folks and vote for some government program to help them out. If such a program isn't paid by a comparable tax increase, it will increase government debt, drive inflation higher, and widen the gap between the poor and the middle class. The more the government helps the poor without requisite tax increases, the more it stifles the free market. The smaller the free market, the less hope most have of extricating themselves from a life of dependency and mediocrity. I don't believe that's the kind of country that we want. Thank you for visiting Reengineering Politics. I plan to continue posting videos on political topics, so please stay tuned. And if you'd prefer not to wait for my videos, please read my book, Engineering Unity: A Path to Resolving Political Polarization in the United States. I've left a link to the Amazon listing in the description below. I have also left a link to my blog post on the same topic entitled The Politics of Money. I'd love it if you like this video and subscribe to the Reengineering Politics YouTube channel. Thanks for watching, and I hope you return for more political insight that is neither left nor right.